Oh.
She's here. So.
Good morning.
We're rolling.
Yeah, we're rolling.
Yeah.
Okay, good morning, everyone.
It's about to.
This is the Board of County Commissioners, agenda setting work session. It is Tuesday, October 25th, 2022. It is 9:06 a.m. This is a hybrid meeting. We're in Building 1, Room 280. For public virtual attendance, you may follow along on the Thurston County YouTube channel. I'm Carolina Mejia. I'm the chair of the board. Vice Chair Ty Menser to my right, Commissioner Gary Edwards joining us via Zoom, but will be joining us here in the boardroom shortly. County Manager Ramiro Chavez, as well as Assistant County Manager Robin Campbell. We have many staff joining us in the boardroom as well as via Zoom. We'll start off our agenda with our standing item, which is homeless strategies.
Good morning, Commissioners. Keely Marino with Public Health and Social Services. Just a brief update for you today. The Regional Housing Council is meeting this week for its long meeting. It starts at 4 p.m., ends at 6. We will be accepting public comment. In order to register for that meeting, please go to your Google or whatever search engine and put Regional Housing Council, Thurston County, and you'll get right to the page and you'll see the registration link there. Other than that, I did get confirmation today from the City of Olympia that they will conclude the camping along Ensign Road this week. On Wednesday, the permits end. On Thursday, any remaining vehicles that have residents in them that would like to move, that are going to move to Quinn Street Village, those vehicles will be towed, and those vehicles with residents that have chosen not to go to Quinn Street Village will be required to drive away on Thursday morning. So ostensibly by Friday, Ensign Road should be clear. And that is my update for today.
Thank you so much, Keely. Commissioner Edwards, any questions?
No, I do not have any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Menser? And no questions from me. Okay. Thank you, Keely.
Thank you.
Okay, next is the review of the Board of County Commissioners draft agenda for our meeting of October 25th, 2022. And just for the public's knowledge, this meeting is at 6 p.m. today, not at 2. So if you would like to attend or provide public comment, please join us at 6 p.m. today. So we'll call the meeting to order at 6 p.m. The Pledge of Allegiance to be led by Commissioner Edwards. Approval of the Tuesday, October 25th, 2022 agenda and approval of the board meeting minutes from October 18th, 2022. Next is an opportunity for the public to address the board and county manager's update. County manager, anything?
Sure.
Okay. Any questions? Moving on to consent items, there's 3. Item 3A is the approval of the voucher list.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For your consideration is for the board to approve the voucher list for the week of September 19, 2022 for a combined amount of $2,412,959.49. This item is in your consent agenda, since we do not have any expenditures related to the atrium, the 3,000%.
Commissioner Edwards?
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Next is item 3B, Community Planning and Economic Development, interlocal agreement with the City of Olympia for permit processing of subdivision referred to as Mud Bay Residential.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You reviewed this item last week, and this interlocal agreement between the Thurston County and the City of Olympia allows for the City of Olympia to process a land permit application submitted by the Tenano Land Company, LLC. What it makes a little bit interesting is this particular proposal is 2 parcels are in with the unincorporated municipal limits of Olympia, and 1 parcel is outside of the City of Olympia, but in the UGA for Olympia. I think it makes sense to give the Olympia under this agreement the authority to process this application. And again, the applicant is the one who has requested this, And it will streamline the process to go through this permit application. So with this, with your concurrence, allow me to sign this in-local agreement with the City of Olympia to process this proposal.
Any questions? Commissioner Edwards?
No questions, thank you.
Commissioner Mentor?
Covered it last week.
Yeah, a lot of my questions got covered last week as well, so thank you. Next is item C, subrecipient agreement for FFY 20 Homeland Security Grant Funding with Black Lake McLean Fire Department.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As a matter of background, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security provides funds to support state and local efforts to prevent terrorism and other catastrophic events and to prepare the nation for threats and hazards that pose the greatest risk to the security of the United States. Thurston County Emergency Management is the coordinating agency on the Homeland Security Region 3, which includes all the cities and towns within the Grace Harbor, Lewis, Mason, Pacific, and Thurston counties. This particular proposal is a pass-through money. It will allocate $19,791 to the McLean Black Lake Fire District to support training and equipment costs for the Regional Special Operation Rescue Team, also known as SORT, S-O-R-T. And this is included in the budget, and the performance of this particular grant was from October 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2023. And Ben is here to answer any particular questions.
Any questions, Ben, for Ben?
No questions, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So with that, we'll move on to department items. Items 4A, and we have two 4As.
Sorry.
No worries. Ordinance for adoption of number A27 non-conforming code update critical areas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For your consideration is to approve an ordinance updating Thurston County Title 24, Chapter 2, 24.08, and outlines the definitions on the critical area ordinance. The Planning Commission reviewed this item in 4 work sessions back in April 6, April 20, and June 1st. In June 2015 of 2022, the Planning Commission held a public hearing on May 18, 2022. And subsequently, at their meeting of the Planning Commission on June 15, 2022, the Planning Commission submitted a recommendation to the board on a 5-3 vote for you to consider approval of this code amendment. The Board of County Commissioners had a briefing on August 3rd, 2022, and subsequently you hear a public hearing on September 27, 2022, where you accepted public testimony. You had a follow-up on October 12, 2022, where at that point you provide direction to staff to submit an AIS for you to consider final approval of this particular chapter amendment. I believe Ashley is here to answer the particular questions.
Any questions for Ashley?
No, I'm in good shape, but I'm gonna go with the planning commission.
No questions?
I've asked many questions all along the way, not this morning, thank you.
Okay, and I don't have any questions in regards to this. But Ashley, you have a new title within Community Planning and Economic Development.
Oh.
I do. I am the new Agriculture Community Program Manager.
Oh, congratulations.
So congratulations, Ashley. We're very excited to have you on board. When is the start date?
Oh, I started about a month ago and
Perfect.
I'm staying busy. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, I was like, I didn't know when the official start date was, but very excited to have you in that position. Thank you so much. Okay. With that, we'll move on to emergency services. Item 5A, medic unit procurement.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a new item for the board. You did not review this item last week. And the reason that I'm bringing this for your consideration, it has a little bit of a sense of urgency. The request is for you to authorize the procurement of 5 new paramedic units for the deployment of the Thurston County in 2024. As you know, the paramedic units are utilized for the treatment and transport of those patients that are more critically ill and acute injured throughout the community. Medic 1 operates frontline medic units into the reserve status for over a course of 5-year rotation. What is happening and has become to our knowledge due to the extreme supply chain constraints, we would like to make sure that we put a request as soon as possible so we have those units being delivered in 2024. And I'm going to let Ben explain a little bit of the nuances of this request, because by the board authorizing this particular process, which is included in the budget, by the way, and is part of the overall strategy and replacement and the replacement of paramedic units. The vendor is going to open up for a certain period of time, and we don't know when they open the request for new units. So the department needs to be in the position to go ahead and somewhat submit those requests and be in the position to be first in line in a way for those units to be delivered in 2024. So at this point, this is really the request that we asked the board to authorize the department director, interim director, to make sure when that window opens by the vendor, we're in the position to submit the request for the 5 new paramedic units. That's really in just this request, and that is probably what I bring in this for your attention as a sense of urgency. Ben, did I cover pretty much high level?
Absolutely. I just want to clarify one thing. There are kind of 2 parts to every medic unit that we purchase. There's the box, to keep it simple, and then there's the chassis, which is made by Ford or Dodge or GMC or any other vehicle vendor out there. Due to the limited supply of Ford chassis, the vendor in this case is Ford, which is limiting the amount of chassis that they're going to make in order to produce ambulances. They made us aware on October 18th that there would be a 3-hour total window that Ford would have the portal open for ambulance specific or emergency vehicle specific chassis. That creates in between October 18th and November 2nd. And that created a situation where we needed to get this in front of you sooner than later. I would also like to reiterate that this is on a scheduled timeline in terms of vehicle replacement. For every 5 years, we rotate the fleet. And this is actually going to fall even a year behind because of a 16-month, again, that 16-month back order for ambulances throughout the country.
That's worse than getting Paul McCartney tickets.
And I believe the EMS council is tracking on this particular procurement, Ben?
Yes, so they approved in the 23, or they recommended, and which was approved in the 23 budget, 2 medic units. Our normal rotation is 2, 3, 2 over the course of 3 years. Unfortunately, due to the back order, you're getting a total of 5. So the first 2 years combined, 2 and 3 combined into 5 total for 2024. Both of those have been in the board approved the 23 budget, incorporating the first 2 units, and built into the 10-year plan in 2024 were the next 3 units.
So Ben, what do you have to do in this 3-hour window? Do we have to fly you to Detroit to line up at the Ford building?
Click the button.
Or click the button on the internet over and over, refresh? What do you do?
So I don't know the ins and outs of all this. We work with Lifeline Emergency Vehicles as the company that we're going to be purchasing vehicles through. The vendor needs a PO. That we're going to keep this super administrative. I wish there was a super secret process I could tell you, but they need a PO number to be able to put the 5 chassis that we need on the list for them to order through Ford when this portal opens. But I wish there was a secret door in Detroit that we knock on repeatedly.
You described this to me in a one-on-one we had. Is there anything different today from what we talked about a couple of weeks ago about this issue? Is there any evolution to what's going on here?
No, I would say the only evolution is that actually supply chain is getting a little worse in terms of getting longer and longer. We were hoping for a 12 to 16 month, and we've been informed it's a minimum of 16 months now from point of order.
All right, thanks.
Yep.
Ben, the vote on this is the group voted on this, unanimous, wasn't it?
The EMS Council?
Yeah.
In terms of the budget support,
Yeah.
the EMS Council unanimously recommended the budget, yes.
Okay.
Okay, no questions from me. That's hefty, but, okay, thank you, Ben.
Thank you.
Public Health and Social Services, item 6A, or B6A, approve revisions to the Veterans Assistance Program policy. And do we have a red line copy? I did not get that.
Yes, I will get you a copy before this
Okay.
afternoon.
Thank you.
Lenise, do you follow up on the request from last week to get a red line copy of the policies they were proposing to do?
Yes,
Could you send that to me this morning, please?
yes, sir.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
My apologies. This particular proposal, you reviewed this under your consent agenda last week, and you asked to bring this as a department item. So staff has the opportunity to explain to the public what their request is. This is really to increase the maximum allocation to assistance to veterans. One goes from 1,000 to 2,000 for a single veteran, and from 2,000 to 4,000 for a family in overall allocation assistance. Also, this proposal increases the eligibility of family members who share a residence with the property owner from 500 to 1,000. And the next item is to increase the maximum allowance for burial services from $800 to $1,200. That's the three major elements of this proposal, and Lenise will be in the position to walk through this afternoon. We'll make sure you get the red line prior to this afternoon, Commissioners.
Questions, Commissioner Edwards?
No questions, thank you.
Commissioner Menzer?
No.
No questions from me either. Okay, moving on to item 6B, set a public hearing on an amendment to the approved fiscal year 2016 and 2019 HUD annual action plans.
Thank you, Commissioner, for reviewing this item last week, and in gist, this is related to the CDBG money that has been allocated to a couple of projects to the city of Tenino. And one allocation was in 2016, and the other one was in 2019. The city of Tenino has made a great effort to make sure that we secure a contractor, but the project has not moved forward. As a result, we cannot be able to spend the money based on the timeline allocations of those years. So this particular proposal allows to flexibility to move allocations from 2016 to 2019 in order to allow the city of Tenino to have a little more flexibility to deliver the projects they have been assigned under the CDBG money, which is the Community Development Grant Program. And as anything related to any amendments to the HUD program, in this case is the amendments to the action plans for 2019, 2016, and 2019. The board is required to hold a public hearing before you take an action. And this item is for you to consider setting the public hearing for November 15, 2022 at 3:30 in the afternoon.
Thank you. Questions, Commissioner Edwards?
No questions, thank you.
Commissioner Menzer?
So at a kind of a basic level, this is an action by the Board of County Commissioners to help support one of our South County communities and complete one of the projects.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. That will move on to item C, which is set a public hearing for the 2021 Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report.
Similar to the previous item, this is related to the annual performance evaluation report. that is required by the Housing and Urban Development HUD. And this is for the 2021 annual performance evaluation report. And again, before you may consider approving this particular report and submitted to HUD, the board is required to hold a public hearing for you to receive public testimony on this performance and evaluation report. This proposal for you is to consider setting the public hearing for November 15, 2022 at 3:30 in the afternoon. And Tom is here to answer any questions. Jacinda also.
Questions? Commissioner Edwards?
No, no questions, thank you.
Commissioner Munster?
No.
Oh, just cruising by.
Okay, moving on to Public Works, item 7A, approve Southern Concrete Products as single source vendor for Yelm Highway Southeast precast wall materials.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. You also reviewed
County
this
Manager
item.
packed the excitement into this.
Yes, because it's my bread and butter in a way.
Concrete
Used to be
products.
concrete panels. I think all of us have driven by portions of Young Highway between Henderson and Rainier Road. When we improved that particular section of Young Highway, we built 2 runabouts. And as we expanded the footprint of the roadway, we were required by the federal government, since we use federal grants, to use the noise attenuators. And the noise attenuators in this case are the noise walls that you see along the way. Over the last few years, those walls get hit as any infrastructure that we build. When we issued the bid proposal, when we built this particular project, the department secured additional panels just to make sure that we have enough in storage. When the wall has been hit, we just go ahead and replace those panels as needed. Well, the wall over the years have been hit many times, and the supply that we have in Public Works got dry out, pretty much. So there is a section right now that is open that we need to replace. And when we issued this particular bid, it was a sole source and a specific vendor. They had a particular panel design and the slots in the temple wall. And this is the Southern Concrete Products. So this particular ask is for you to consider approve a contract and a sole source vendor with Concrete Products for us to secure the panels that is needed to replace the damaged wall. Marcus?
Good morning, Commissioners. Marcus Dorvick, Senior Civil Engineer. Yeah, I would just add that it would get the materials for the current repair, but also allows us the flexibility in the future if we have to address this again, the quick response to order those materials again as needed.
Okay,
And the internal county auditor has looked into the sole source and has agreed.
okay, questions, Commissioner Edwards?
No questions, thank you.
Commissioner Munster? No questions from me either. Okay, after that, we will review our standing items, and that will conclude our agenda for the meeting of October 25th, 2022.
Can I comment on that?
Yes, sir.
So just in case public's listening in, the 6 p.m. meeting tonight is our 3rd attempt at a utilization of an ordinance that we passed that allowed the 4th meeting of the month to be in the evening. This is responsive to citizen input that we got. It's not for our convenience, it's for the public's convenience. So hopefully folks will take advantage of it. It's not a scheduling issue that it helps us at all, but we're hoping that it helps folks attend meetings that couldn't otherwise attend at all or check in. So attend the meeting and give us that feedback loop that this is something of value, because the board will make it's an optional thing that we built into the ordinance, and we'll be making a determination of whether to continue doing it based on people's interest in it. That's it.
Okay. So our November 1st draft agenda, we'll call the meeting to order at 2 p.m. The Pledge of Allegiance to be led by Vice Chair Menser, approval of the Tuesday, November 1st agenda, and approval of the board meeting minutes from October 25th. Then there will be an opportunity for the public to address the board and county manager's update.
If there is any particular updates that need to follow up as a result of today's public testimony, I will do so.
Thank you. Now consent items, 3A and 3B. Item 3A from the assessor's office, a resolution reclassifying position in the Thurston County Pay and Classification Pay Plan at 01R01312.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Commissioners, this is a strategy the Assessor's Office has exercised in the last few years and has been proven to be extremely effective. The assessor brings individuals at a lower classification, goes through the training process, help those individuals secure the needed certifications in order to move to the next position. And that is really what has happened in this case. The assessor's office requested the reclassification of an appraiser assistant to a senior appraiser. And by investing on the training and the certifications of the lower level, I think it helps on the recruitment and the retention strategies, as well as bring value to the organization, his office. They don't have to retrain or find somebody at a higher level of skills. This item has an impact on the budget that goes from $4,837 to $6,171. That's just about $1,333 a month, a 27% increase. The assessor is not looking for any budget amendments in 2022. He's able to absorb this, and this will be part of the baseline moving into 2023.
Thank you. Questions, Commissioner Edwards?
No comment, no.
No, okay. Moving on to item 3B, which from the prosecuting attorney's office, BJA Smart Prosecution Grant Waiver of Non-Competitive Bidding and Contract Execution.
Thank you, Commissioners. This is a follow-up to the briefing you received from the Thurston County Prosecuting Attorney last week related to this particular grant. As you stated, it comes from the Bureau of Justice Assistant and Department of Justice. And one of the requirements is for the Department of Justice is to go through a competitive bidding process in order to secure the services for any contractor. And that is included in the procurement policy. Our procurement policy at the beginning, early in the year, it created an issue for us as a staff to process this. But the county prosecutor, as he stated to you last week, he went on directed to the federal government where they agreed on a sole source at that level. And the sole source is to have a contract with the Majors for Justice. And the Major for Justice, it will provide somewhat of a database dashboard analysis. They will address racial disparities and disproportionalities in Thurston County criminal justice, as well as capabilities of the prosecuting attorney's office, and it will really bring a transparency to their business. As part of the conversation, as you may recall, there's an opportunity to see how we can not consolidate, but just make sure that we bring all the many different dashboards that we're currently working on. There is one dashboard on the lead, as you know, another one in the pretrial services, and we also have an overall county-wide dashboard. But as we move along, I believe there is an opportunity to make sure that we don't consolidate, but at least we talk to each other so we don't duplicate the efforts. So this particular proposal is for you to approve the waiver for non-competitive bidding process and authorize the prosecuting attorney to execute that contract with Majors for Justice. Any questions?
Questions, Commissioner Edwards?
No question.
Commissioner Menzer?
I'll just say I've met with Measures for Justice myself, I think before the prosecutor did. It's a pretty impressive group, and what they've done in other counties I think will be really valuable to us, and hopefully we'll find a way to make sure that, as the county manager said, that we coordinate this with other efforts going on in the county, but having them kind of setting a standard I think will really help. for this kind of work. They're kind of on the forefront of this kind of work.
Thank you. Next, the auditor's office, item 4A, and this is approval of the voucher list.
Yeah, for your consideration is for you to approve the voucher list for the week of September 26, 2022 for a combined amount of $3,977,344.30. This item is as a department item, which we do have expenditures related to the atrium. I still have to give you the details as to the amount and the pages in which those are, but there's some expenditures of the atrium. I will bring those to you during this week, where you can find those.
Thank you. Questions, Commissioner Edwards?
No questions.
Commissioner Menzer?
No.
Okay, Community Planning and Economic Development, item 5A. This is set a public hearing for comprehensive plan docket item CP-4 Capital Improvement Program.
Thank you, Commissioners. This is related to the 2023-2028 Capital Improvement Program. The board has been briefed on this on a couple of occasions. The Planning Commission also has held work sessions on August 17, 2022, which the Planning Commission held a public hearing September 21st, 2022. Subsequently, they unanimously recommended the board to approve the Capital Improvement Program CIP as stated. The board was briefed on July 13, 2022, also on October 13, 2022. And as part of the process, this needs to be coincide with the public hearings with budget, as well as the approval of the budget process. So this particular proposal is for you to set a public hearing for December 5th, 2022 at 6 in the afternoon. And this is just part of the overall public hearings that will be held in relation to the budget on December 5th, on December 6th. And we already have a scheduled time for you on December 16th, will be you considering approving all the matters related to the budget, as well as the Capital Improvement Program, the CIP, and the Transportation Improvement Program as well, since the board needs to take separate actions approving those particular budget-related items. Any questions?
Questions, Commissioner Edwards?
Did the planning commission have a recommendation?
Yep, 9-0.
9-0?
Yeah, to recommend approval as presented.
Commissioner Menzer? Okay, moving on to item 6, emergency services, 6A, pre-hospital portable ultrasound devices.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. The action needs to be revised a little bit because it includes two elements on this. One is for you to waive the competitive process and also to approve the Director of Emergency Services to purchase 14 Butterfly Network devices. So the Butterfly Network devices has produced a handheld portable ultrasound device capable of being deployed in the pre-hospital environment where durability is essential to the ongoing utilization of functionality of the device. The Butterfly is a proprietary microchip technology, and the internal auditor has already reviewed into this particular sole source and has agreed and signed onto this proposal. So for your consideration again is to go ahead and authorize the director and waiving the procurement process to purchase 14 Butterfly Network devices for a total cost of $49,676.35. This is already included on the Medic One budget, and I believe the Emergency Services EMS Council has approved and recommended approval for this proposal. Kurt?
Yeah, good morning, Commissioners. Kurt Harden, Director of Emergency Services. And yes, the EMS Council unanimously recommended approval of the current budget, which included the ultrasound devices.
Thank you. Questions, Commissioner Edwards?
No questions.
Commissioner Menzer? No questions from me.
Okay, Kurt, do you hear me? The recommended action needs to be revised on the, okay, thank you.
Yeah, working on that today.
Thank you. Moving on to item 6B, from Medic One vehicle replacement.
Yes, this particular proposal is for you to authorize the replacement of a 14-year-old 2008 Ford Expedition that is due up for replacement. And this particular request is for you to authorize the Director of Emergency Services to get a contract with DES. That's part of the process. And to secure and purchase a brand new vehicle for $69,647, period. This is part of the overall Medic One support vehicles that we have in fleet. It's already included on the budget. And there is a great possibility, if the board approves this, that we can access the DES contract, and the vehicle will be in place before December 31st, 2022. And that is the strategy behind this. And it's already included on this year's budget. Okay. And also this is also has been reviewed by the EMS Council, and they have provided a recommendation for you to approve. Kurt?
Again, Kurt Ardner, Director of Emergency Services. The county manager summed it up very well. And so we're just trying to get a vehicle that we originally wanted to replace and was in the budget to replace in 2020, but COVID happened and then supply chain disruptions happened. And so we're again trying to replace this vehicle.
Thank you. Questions, Commissioner Edwards?
No questions.
Commissioner Menzer?
Is there a reason why this vehicle couldn't be replaced by a electric or hybrid vehicle of some sort? It's going to be I'm going to be a broken record in the upcoming months and years potentially that we push forward on electrifying our vehicle fleets.
We have looked at that, and currently the technology is not in place for first response vehicles on the EMS side to be able to be put the all electric capability in there, as well as provide all the services that we need to, because there's a lot of equipment that goes along with these vehicles that needs to be able to run, such as oxygen and other typical life-saving measures. So we are currently looking at that. We're hopeful that the technology will improve in the future so that we will be able to take a good hard look at all electric vehicles in the future.
Can you explain more about what this vehicle is and does, how it fits into the broader, I mean, it's not an ambulance, obviously, a Ford Expedition, so what exactly does what's its role in your operation?
In our operations, what it does is it's an administrative vehicle that's used on a weekly basis and within the Medic One staff for the ALS program. Plus, it doubles up as a response vehicle when we have a need for a surge capacity. And we've used that surge capacity multiple times in the last 3 years. We used it during COVID through drive-through vaccine clinics. We used it for wildland pack testing. And we also used it, if you remember, about a year ago, we had situations with transport capability. We used it at St. Pete's Hospital to provide coverage for patient care as patients were brought into the emergency department. So it's a dual purpose vehicle. It has the capability for being a response vehicle, but it also on a day-to-day basis is an administrative vehicle. So we get a good use out of it.
Okay, I may need some more information. Kurt and I'll follow up with you, Kurt. We'll talk about what options we might have for something like that, and you can fill me in on where things stand in terms of what you've learned about technology, et cetera.
Okay.
Maybe related to this conversation, sort of, I touched base with Kurt, and next year, Kurt, Robin, and I will be embarking to see the possibility to bring Medic One vehicles into the ER&R program that we have in the county. This particular vehicle, for instance, that is a big investment because of the replacement. And as you know, the ER&R process allows to deposit on a monthly basis. When the replacement comes, we don't have to see that major investment. I know that at some point we were looking at this possibility. There's a lot of nuances related to this particular matter, but next year we'll look at revisit that again, see if there's a possibility to bring Medic One vehicles into the overall PRNR program.
Thank you. I had around the same questions, Kurt, as Commissioner Menzer in terms of, I know that we're trying to electrify some of our fleet, so I was wondering why. And so it seems like just with the type of vehicle, it's not there yet. But more to come on that one. Moving on to Public Works, item 7A, contract award for the solid waste facilities pump systems upgrades and improvement, CP number 91717.
This has a little bit of a history, and it's related to the supply chain issues and the cost of doing business in a way. Back early in the year, you authorized the department to secure bids for the pump systems improvements on the waste and recovery center, also known as the WARC, related to solid waste. The department went through the process, and on June 27, they received bids, which resulted that it was way beyond the engineer's estimate and also way above what the budget authority, the board authorized at that point. The department went through the process of reassessing the bid documents and reissued the request for the bidding process, including options 1 and options 2, to give a little more latitude as to how we can manage this. So on September 29, 2022, the department received 4 bids. And the result of those 4 bids, the department's requesting for authorized only on option 1, which is related to the pump infrastructure and not necessarily related to the stormwater needs there. That would be part of the next step, hopefully next year. Under this request is for you to authorize the department to issue the contract to Rawlings Incorporated of Aberdeen, Washington, for an aggregate contract amount of $2,864,534, and this is included on the current budget for solid waste. And I think Susan is here. Yeah. Any questions?
Yes.
Questions, Commissioner Edwards?
What were the other bids that came in? How many did we get?
They, do you have, we received, in the last one, we received 4 bids. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, but what was the dollar amount? Because this is quite a bit higher.
So do you have, Susan, the bid proposals between the low bid, which is this particular outfit, versus the high bid?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
So on the bids that we received 4. And this is the lower bidder. What was the amount of the high bid?
I don't have that at my fingertips at the moment.
Jennifer's got it, she said.
Yeah.
Oh, the department director is here, to the rescue.
Good morning, Jennifer Walker, Public Works Director. So as the county manager said, we did receive 4 bids. The bid base was 4 different ones. So 2.698, 2.290, 2.123, I'm rounding, and then 2.145. That was the base bid. Does that?
How did we end up then at 2.7?
Because we are asking to award, one moment, bid option 1. So bid option 1 for that first 2.698, you would add 150,000 to that. The second one, sorry, I can do them. Want to give me a minute? I
Well,
can
no,
do math.
I'm just curious
Sure.
why we're going with the high bid instead.
We're not. I'll give you so the first one was 150,000. So you add 2.698 to and 150,000 to that. The second one, the 2.290, you'd add 500 and like $510,593
For the
Why
option.
add for what? Why
for bid option 1.
For
So we
option
had the base bid, then we had bid option 1, bid option 2. And so we're doing the base bid, so a certain amount of work, and then adding an additional amount of work, which is the second bid option, number 1.
So in the end, you ended up with the low bid,
Yes.
receiving the bid. I mean, it sounds a little confusing, I'm sure, to the public as well as myself, so. Are you allowed to take into consideration past performance on these bids,
We do the lowest bid for public works projects.
straight on lowest bid?
We wish the legislature would give us that option to assess past performance, but according to the law, we're required to award low bid for public works projects.
Responsible bidder.
How much out of sync was this with your engineer's estimate?
What is the engineer's estimate? For the county there.
It's quite a bit more.
2.496. Sales, yeah, 2.496. So about, making me do math on the spot, so.
No, that's close, that's close enough.
900,000.
That's close enough. Okay.
See what happens when you come in person.
Any other questions on that, Commissioner? Thank you.
Commissioner Metzger? I'm wondering, I wasn't at the last SWAC meeting, because we had budget, but, I was wondering, has there been conversations about, having to send back the RFP and kind of what the conversation was in regards to that?
Good morning, Commissioners. This is Rick Thomas, Manager of the Project Program Management Office at Public Works. The SWAC has been kept informed of the process for this project for many months. They do know that we were bidding this now with a base bid plus 2 options. The base bid was for the leachate pump system. Option 1 was for the condensate pump system, and then option 2 was for the stormwater system. What we are wanting to award the contract for is for the base bid, which is the leachate system, and the option 1, which is the condensate system. We had funding to fully fund those, as Jennifer Walker was mentioning. The option 2, we are planning to go out for a separate bid. If additional funding is going to be approved as part of the 2023 budget amendment process.
Thank you. Okay.
Sorry, question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now that we have this paper. So the item says we're awarding to Roglands. And this sheet shows the base bid in option 1. The math doesn't add up somehow. It would be 2.5 and you've got 2.72.
Correct. So the math to get to that number would be the base bid amount plus the option 1 amount, which I believe was about $373,000.
Yep.
If you add those two together, you're still short of the award amount, and that's because we had to add sales tax in order to make the full dollar amount.
All right.
Pesky sales tax.
The sales tax. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions?
Well, I do have one other question maybe, and that would be, if we go to another outfit for your other piece of this particular project, will the coordination fit properly? I mean, I hate to use an example that I've seen in the past, but I've seen a new road put in, then a utility outfit come along and, you know, put in, pipes or wires or whatever it is, and that's been a kind of a big pet peeve of mine to try and always prevent that from happening. So that coordination is figured into this.
Yeah, Commissioner Edwards, this is Rick Thomas again. Yes, it is. I 2 or 3 months ago, the board had approved a single source supply contractor for the SCADA portion of the project, which is primarily the automatic control system. So that same contractor will be doing all of the SCADA integration of all of the pumps. So even when we do the second contract, that same contractor will be doing all of the controls work. So all of the controls are completely compatible. The pumps, I guess that the pumps can be the pumps. They're basically just a piece of equipment that pump water. It's the controls that are extremely important on this. And so we do have that single source contractor that actually is doing all of the SCADA work for the entire pump project.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item 8A from the Sheriff's Office, renewal of contract with Tactical Athlete Performance Institute LLC.
This is an item the board has reviewed in the Sheriff's Office requesting to renew the contract on a yearly basis with Tactical Athlete Performance Institute. This is a particular outfit that provides an integrated, comprehensive, and personalized health and performance program for sheriff deputies who have been injured on the job. It allows them to, expedite the process of how they can come back to work. You asked, I believe, last time, really what is the value, and because in some way, if they bring those sheriff deputies back to the workforce, what is the net result? The Sheriff's Office has provided they have avoided with this program close to $29,330 of overtime basis for 7 months of implementation. So it appears to be a very successful program. And I will let Under Sheriff Brady just to cover the rest of the conversation.
Thank you, County Manager. Good morning, Commissioners. As you may recall, this was a trial contract that you approved at the end of last year. At the time that we provided this new information to you, that cost avoidance was estimated at about $29,000. We just had a meeting this week with Rebound, which is how they do business, the name of the business here. It's Tactical Athlete as well. But we had a meeting with them, with our staff, and we've been very involved with the risk staff as well. And we were advised to date, their estimated cost avoidance for this program for the Sheriff's Office at about $64,000. We've been extremely pleased with this program. Certainly cost avoidance is a big piece of it. But I think the bigger piece is the impact on our staff. So in the past, when we had employees that were injured, they would often wait anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks for some medical treatments, such as an MRI. This has turned that into days at the most, a week to get those appointments in there. So I think that's really a significant impact to our staff to get them in and seen and back to work as quick as we can. We definitely have seen an impact from this program on our staff, and think that it's a really important piece for our staff. So again, this request is to extend that contract. Again, we did a 1-year trial, and we think it's been very successful.
Thank you. Questions, Commissioner Evans?
No questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Menzer?
Don't we have a budget item that?
Policy level, yeah, policy level.
Policy level, you'll see it on Wednesday.
So based on that, we'll address it next week.
Yeah, that's the timing, depending on your preliminary decisions on Wednesday.
Could we go ahead, my question is, can we put in, not a question, but more of a comment, can we put the amount of the contract?
Roll out the amount of the action.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
We do have a public hearing starting at 3:30, and that is a public hearing to hear objections to the resolution of intention to establish the Offutt Lake Management District number 24.
Thank you, Commissioner. This is a long process. You have received an application for you to consider forming a lake management district on Offutt Lake. And this is the next step in the process for you to receive public testimony related to this particular action. It will have been receiving a little bit of some feedback, perhaps how the announcement for the public hearing has been. And this really is related to the statute as to how that is stated, where the statute clearly states where the public hearings could receive objections. But obviously that is not limited on the public hearing for those individuals, the citizens who are providing an objection. It's just how the statute language is stated as to how we need to proceed with a public hearing. Obviously, the public hearing is going to be open to anybody who provides public testimony, whether support, an objecting or not, related to the public hearing. I just want to bring you up to speed. We have received some feedback about that. And again, is the specific language on the statute that we're using to hold the public hearing.
Thank you. Commissioner Edwards, questions?
No questions.
Commissioner Menson? Okay, I don't have any questions either. That will conclude our agenda for Tuesday, November 1st, 2022. Moving on to proclamations and awards and advisory boards and commissions, and I'm passing it to Jamie Caldwell, clerk of the board.
Good morning, Jamie Caldwell, clerk of the board. For proclamations and awards, I have no updates. For the boards and commissions, I have received no new applications yet. The standing applications have been included in your packet for review.
Thank you. Commissioners, questions, comments?
No, thank you.
Are there any, on the Storm and Surface Water Advisory Board, how long has that been open?
I'm not positive off the top of my head because I wasn't aware that they had openings. As of last week, I got the updated list that's on the cover page there, so I can double check with the staff contact and verify how long it's been open.
I'm just wondering if there's any reason not to appoint the applicant. I'm fine with the applicant that's there. Unless, the board wants to give more time for whatever. I didn't know how long it's been open.
And it's by district?
They do have district and at-large seats. This one would be, I put it in as the district fee because we did have a district fee opening as well, so it would fill that one.
I don't think we've ever done this, we've always done it as a board.
No.
It's not like planning commission where we particularly nominate. They just have to slot in and us, and there is an at-large as I understand it, so.
And I believe the Stormwater Surface Advisory Board has provided recommendation.
Yes.
And that is unique to this particular board, because on the resolution created the specific, the Stormwater Surface Advisory Board will provide a recommendation to the board, so they have reviewed the application.
Yeah.
They're supportive.
They're supportive?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is everybody good to go on that one?
You are? Okay, it's 2 votes.
Okay.
Outside of the Housing Authority applications, I don't have any others.
Okay.
When are we addressing Housing Authority? I finished my interviews of the applicants.
I haven't finished my interviews of the applicants, but if we want to have a conversation on it, we can.
We can do it next week if you got more time.
Yeah.
It's no rush.
Is that okay with you?
Sure.
So we'll bring the appointment of Mr. Sahid Chidri for next week's consideration. Is that? Yeah, okay. Thank you. You will be in your consent agenda.
Thank you. Okay, yeah, you'll check in.
Good morning, Commissioners. Megan Porter, Public Information Supervisor. My list this week is to develop a communications plan around the move to the atrium and start creating some communications materials around that since we have a little bit better idea of the time frame. So that's what I'll be focusing on this week and hopefully getting something out in the, by Thursday or Friday.
Thank you. Questions for Megan? Commissioner Edwards?
No questions.
Commissioner Menser?
No.
Okay, do you want to take a break before we jump on with legislative updates? So it is 10:07, we'll go ahead and take a 15-minute break. Okay, it is 10:24 a.m. We are back from break. We left off with legislative update, county's 2023 legislative agenda. And we have Deborah Munguia who has joined us, county manager.
Thank you, commissioners, and welcome, Deborah. As you know, Deborah Munguia serves as the county lobbyist, and if I can probably state the fact, she has been nothing but exceptional in providing us help through the legislative process in the last few years. And I just like to publicly say thank you very much for everything you have done for the county. This particular item is just to start working on what will be the county's 2013 legislative agenda. I have prepared this draft that is before you. I believe has all the items that I've heard the board will be interested in moving forward. Let me just give you at a high level, and then we'll go back to each of the items, and I will ask Deborah to provide her perspective as to how he sees those items as we move through the legislative process. The idea is hopefully to pare down some of those items. That is the idea because there's a lot. And certainly when we have a lot of legislative items, it becomes a little more cumbersome as to how we can target what we need to do with the legislation process. So and again, I think you're well familiar with the first one, maintain judicial impact fee funding. That continues to be an issue, and will continue to advocate for us to receive the funding. I think we need to update the amount as to what that is. But every yearly, on a yearly basis, it continues to be an issue as to why the legislature has to be taking a specific action to compensate the county for extraordinary court impact fees related to the cases. The state just chooses Superior Court mainly to litigate their items here in Thurston County. The next is establish the separate property tax levies, as you know, taking the veterans levy as well as the mental health and the developmental disabilities levy out. Last year we had the same item, and we went all the way to a committee hearing in which that stopped. That's part of the process. Also, a standing item is to increase the state funding to address mental health and substance abuse disorder treatments. And this is also part of the WASAC legislative agenda, and the WASAC legislative agenda, which we outline in these descriptions, to establish the statewide standards for behavioral health networks. The next item is the I-5 corridor, and to give you a perspective, we received $75 million to the region for the Nisqually Bridge to continue with the process on the engineering. Out of the $75 million that was allocated as part of the legislative session, $18 million were set aside to build 3 runabouts on the Yale cutoff, 507, and that is moving forward. But it became a little bit of evident when this allocation was done that it was only focused on the Nisqually River, and I believe there is a need to continue to have the conversation with the legislators to not to forget the rest of the corridor. And that will be from Nisqually all the way south of Tumwater. There's a lot of need related to this corridor, so we'll touch base on that as well. Next page. We talk about the counties and need revenue and the spending flexibility. And here's what we have, the RE1, RE2, as well as the parking by fees to allow up to 20% for operation, maintenance and operation costs. And those will be only for those projects who have been built and improved using those 2 funding sources or 3 funding sources. And that's the request. The next is the LEOF Plan 1. And in here, as you know, the counties and local governments, counties in particular, have the obligation to continue to provide health and medical services to those individuals that are part of the LEOF Plan 1. That would be the law enforcement officers and firefighters retirement systems. So over the last 6 years, Thurston County has seen an increase of almost 200% on the medical benefits. Although somebody can make the point that perhaps some of those individuals, the number have been decreased, but the costs are increasing because they require additional health requirements in a way. So there is an opportunity, the LEA Plan 1, really the numbers that we have, and maybe Deborah can touch base when we go back to this item. The LEA Plan 1, I believe, is 150% overfunded based on the needs they have to cover. So there is an opportunity for the state to provide help under this plan to local governments to continue to provide those benefits to those involved in this. And lastly is just to support the overall Washington State Association of Counties legislative agenda, which includes specifically the funding for jails. We submitted a survey related to the jails that has been submitted to WASAC, and that is going to be one of the key elements as part of the WASAC's legislative agenda, is to help us address the jail capacity across the state. So with that in mind, let's go back to item number 1. To have any questions for me or Deborah, and we can go through this process.
Maybe I missed it. Did you talk about joint and several liability?
No, I did not include that.
But that is one of our bigger hits that we're being faced with that need adjusting. And I can't imagine that the Association of Counties wouldn't be willing to get involved with that as well. I think it's got to be one of our top priorities on how much more, $1 million, is that what took out of general fund this year, or $1.5 million?
Right, you're talking about, it's actually 1.9 million.
Yeah.
In terms of the risk pool.
The risk pool activity, so
the WASAC did not include this item on the legislative agenda.
No, so the items, and I can go through the items that WASAC has included on their agenda.
did they discuss that item?
They did, but then once everyone broke out through committees, it kind of, I wasn't involved in that committee, so it kind of, I guess, just fizzled away, or it wasn't put
By the
in.
time I pinch hit on the last piece where they were down to 35 and it wasn't on that list, so
Yeah.
it got somehow not.
So I'm guessing
It didn't make the last 35.
I don't know, without putting Deborah on the hot seat, I think this has been a little bit of a trial and error in the last few years related to the joint servant liability. I think you're talking about the issue is because when any type of litigation where the local governments are named, if the other, even if it's a 2%, liability with local governments, if the other parties involved in that litigation don't have the means to pay, then goes back to the local governments to pay the full amount. And I think that's really what Commissioner Edwards stated, at some point, this is not sustainable for local governments because we have seen an increase in the premiums on covering the overall insurance that we have.
Well, we've seen it to the extent that we're talking about going to a self-insured program to get out from underneath that. And I think that's a mistake myself. That's for another conversation.
So Deborah, haven't you seen a similar bill to address that issue in the legislature in the past? And can you tell us about the fate of those bills?
So the issue is that they go after the deep pockets, the ones that they know have the ability to pay. And so for many years, local governments have tried to separate themselves from that so that they are not on the hook for that money. And honestly, they run up against the trial lawyers on that one, and so it has not gone through. But it may be something if we go back to them and we say, well, we want, for instance, to be able to use 20% of these certain revenues for these projects that we built with these things, and this is how much money we're spending on this. Maybe if we can use it as leverage. I'm sure the conversation will come up again. It's not on WASAC's top 4 priority. I don't think it's going to be on AWC's. It's not on AWC's top priority, but it is an ongoing issue in terms of cost to local governments that has not been addressed.
So can I ask, is it, because I haven't tracked this at all, I know in other states and stuff, they've overturned the whole system. Sounds like you're saying the request in the past has not been to overturn joint several liabilities at a fundamental level, but just to give an exemption for local governments as being the deep pocket. But, you know, McDonald's could still be the deep pocket, or, you know, some other corporation. Is that the ask? Versus a comparative liability system like California has, where there is no joint and several liability. You're responsible for the percentage of culpability that the jury finds you have, and that's it.
I think the discussions start there, and then in terms of the local government input, it's like, well, then at least exempt us from it. It gets down to that level, and then it goes away.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna go back and look at the last legislative discussion on that, and I'll follow up with Romero, and I'll get you what happened.
I'd really appreciate that, because Commissioner Edwards keeps bringing it up, and I just don't, I know this issue's been around since like the 80s.
Yeah, way back.
So, you know, I mean, not knowing the history in Washington of the efforts would be useful to me to kind of figure out how useful would it be to prioritize this. You know, it's probably got a long history of failure. But I mean, I had a few other things. I don't know if this is the time or place, Romero, for.
Yeah, this is actually the time.
And I'm not saying that these are more important than what's on here. I'm just throwing them out here because as people advocate to me stuff, I write it down, and these are a few that, you know, if it seems like a legitimate request. So one is I brought up this issue about the animal services system, trying to, the idea here would be a tax on like either pet toys or pet food or something, you know, as modest as you could make it in order to help local jurisdictions with, we pay over $1 million for animal services. And the question is, should that be borne by the community or by pet owners? A second one is the Deschutes Watershed Council. There's folks in the community working with the state legislators already. This would be, so some money got, my understanding of the history is the Nisqually River Council got formed with some seed money from the state legislature once upon a time. And now that we have the Deschutes Watershed Council, which has for many years been trying to form, would the state legislature help get that up and running? And that was embedded in our watershed plan, the original draft. That's two. The third one is one that I think everybody knows about. It's the one that dovetails with the BHO, and now the Healthcare Authority is behind it, which is the ITA court costs. I think WASAC actually had an item related to this. But this one, my first year on the board, I was working with Brad Banks, and I spoke to some legislators about it. Didn't go anywhere at that time, but now it's getting more and more traction, and now the Healthcare Authority's got it on their legislative agenda. So I was thinking it might be the time, I don't know, maybe it's the time to, you know, jump in on that and try to give additional support, because it could mean a lot of more resources to not to the county necessarily directly, but to services in the system through the BHO.
Do you think that is embedded on the WASAC's establishing a statewide standards for reproductive health?
So I have the list of items, and I'm happy to go through them. And I'm not seeing it on here.
What they have on there in terms of behavioral health is that they WASAC is supportive of establishing a statewide standard for behavioral health network adequacy and timeliness of care. And I know that they've had discussions with HCA about that. In the past, the HCA has not been supportive, but the HCA has been put on notice that this is potentially one of WASAC's priorities. They still have to vote in November on this. And so there have been some discussions on that. Is the ITA issue embedded within that?
I gotta remember that discussion. I think that's a different, I think it's somewhat different item.
And I can say that in terms of like the involuntary commitment and voluntary treatment, that the legislature created the Substance Use Recovery Services Advisory Committee, the SURSA committee, when they passed the Blake bill in 2021, and they have delivered their preliminary report, and their final report is due December 1st of this year. And there's a whole list of recommendations in terms of things that can be done to help people with substance use disorder and behavioral health needs. But I didn't see the ITA as one of the recommendations of that.
My suggestion is maybe we just just for the board's consideration, we just pull the language out of the HCA's priority list, or go back to 2019, it was on Brad, I think is the BHO, had, at that time was the BHO, had, there's language that's very precise, and it's about, because what happens is that we get hammered because we open beds, but it's a statewide system, so the more facilities that open creates more ITA proceedings that choose right out of our budget for providing services. It really goes right, again, I mean, it's really a more specific piece of our, here we are asking for more mental health funding, and we have this thing working at cross purposes to that. Anyway, that's number 3. And my 4th one that on my list was the trust. I need to know more information about this, so I'm just gonna throw it out there and I'll try to follow up. Trust land transfer program. I heard about this about a month ago. It's apparently a program that existed in the past, and it was defunded, or it's not, and there's people advocating to bring it back and it's basically a program where if counties want to transfer state lands back into county control, basically you can apply to this, it's like a pool of money that you can apply, and then the state would basically finance that if they choose you. They have a pool of money and applicants, and apparently it existed sometime in the past, and there's been so much discussion around DNR and state lands and legacy forests, et cetera, that there's some interest in bringing this program back, and I don't know for sure that it would be something we would utilize, so it's just something I'm throwing out there for maybe I'll just try to do a little more follow-up on it, because I barely learned about this just 3 weeks ago.
So I used to work at the State Department of Natural Resources, which is where that program
Okay.
resided. And I was not aware that it was defunded, but I can double check with the Commissioner's office and see if this is something that's on her legislative agenda also.
Yeah, if you could tell me just where it stands, because this was, where this came up was at a DNR presentation to the Chehalis Basin Partnership last month. And so it was discussed amongst DNR folks. So I'm not totally off, I may not have the details just right, but I'm not totally off base on that, because it was, discussed right there with DNR folks there. And there was some interest, and it sounded like something that we might want to look more into. So those were the 4 that I just wanted the board to hear them, because they're things that I've heard over the last couple of years.
Thank you. And I just gave everyone a copy of the WASAC priorities that they listed out, which is pursue extension of rural counties public facilities tax for bonding purposes, establish a statewide standard for behavioral health, network adequacy and timeliness of care, and ensure the system is supported, seek funding for jails, capital facilities, workforce, inmates for state agencies, request funding and process to identify the potential benefits of a state and federal fund exchange SAP program, pursue funding for the Brian Abbott Fish Barrier Removal Board and the state capital budget, juvenile detention issues, define juvenile, determine the impact of the definition on county facilities, and consider reorganization of juvenile facilities. Move to Veterans Assistance Levy outside of the county general fund levy, and move the mental health disabilities levy outside of the general fund levy. LAMIRD, I don't know what that is, reforms, additional info.
LAMIRD is local areas of more intense residential development. It's flexibility within growth management to do like Rochester, to allow like more dense development somewhere like Rochester without violating growth management.
Okay.
You can pick areas, so it was flexibility.
Okay, redevelopment boundary expansion, and advocate for the Public Work Board to have necessary increased spending authority associated with the returning revenue in the Public Works Assistance account, and delay the implementation of new relevant legislation until studies completed evaluating the capability of our current energy grid to achieve the required changes.
But this was what made it out of the first vote,
Yeah.
and then we whittled it down, and it was just the top 4 that got like blessed finally by the full committee. Like
You have the top 4?
Yeah.
It's the top 4 on this list.
R, that varies.
You can see the
You
percentages.
see the percentage of the responses.
That's why R, like I was able to get, they for some reason had separated the 2 pieces of our requests, so I got them put together, and then we got them through the first round, and they got to the top 10. But then, I mean, it was funny how there was some, like, you were there, Deborah, that's why I'm looking at you, but like that gal who advocated for that statewide standard for behavioral health, like that was off the radar in my opinion. And she just made this like argument and got a couple of people interested. I mean, I feel like that one just sort of leapfrogged out of nowhere.
And there's still gonna be opportunities for changes to this. Over the last couple of weeks, there have been discussions on the top four with WASAC, and for example, on the jail one, there was a lot more staff research was put into that one, and we'll have to wait and see what comes out of the next WASAC meeting, LSC meeting. But I have a feeling the recommendation based on the conversations that we had with WASAC staff is going to be seek either expansion of the current jails task force, work on this to include some of these other issues, or create a new task force to study some of these issues so that we can explain why we need more money for capital facilities. The feedback that WASAC got from the counties that did submit their surveys, and King County did not submit a survey, so that's a big outlier, and they're not planning on submitting their survey, was $2 billion. So I don't think anybody thinks that the legislature is going to entertain a $2 billion request for county jail facilities. And then on the workforce issue, there was more information is going to be needed on why there is such a workforce shortage, why is there burnout, what's the causes of that, you know, why are people leaving the jails to go work for law enforcement? Well, they have a better retirement system, so is there something that can be done there? So they need more information and they need recommendations to go to the legislature. So if that is the information that goes to the LSC, it's going to go to the co-chairs, I believe. And then there's a meeting in November with the bigger body. I don't know, maybe they'll decide to bump that one down the list and bring something up the list. So there's still opportunities for doing more with this.
So items that I just have one, and for me, is the agricultural supply chain issues. And that's, you know, of course, addressing the meat processing plant. And we've partnered with Pierce County to do a study, but we will need help in addressing, you know, if it's to establish something, it would be great to have the support of a legislator in terms of funding for that, you know, to help us on the next steps. And it includes Pierce and Thurston, we put our funding for it, but the study will be done on a 3-county level, which will include Lewis County as well, is what I was told. And then in that sense, I guess I'll put the ag park as well in there, the Tenino Agricultural Park, and funding for that. And so,
yeah, so there's a lot of items, and obviously, I think the board needs to pare those down to something more, so we can work on it. I don't think we can have 20 items, with all due respect.
Why don't we just, I mean, frankly, I think it'd be easier to just
go by
rank,
one?
well, just rank them like what they did at WASAC and just compile the list and let us just vote like that, and then it's just done. I mean, to me, I could advocate, but it's like, I personally have a preference for specific things, not general things, because I just don't feel like saying, give us more money for mental health. Like, I mean, especially one like that where everybody, like, nobody's saying we don't need that. So I mean, it's like, it's just, to me, it's just like a wasted slot on your sheet in a sense, because you're not telling anyone anything specific they can grab onto, versus saying, we want you to allow us to, you know, park impact fees, we need 15% to maintain our parks. And we can give numbers of all the acreage and the staffing. I mean, we can really back that up. That, to me, that's a very specific, concrete thing. So as an example. But that's just how I would vote if I was looking at a set of priorities. And big things over small, because it's the big things where the state can really get us over the top, you know? I mean, you know, on something where, you know. So I know, those are just my thoughts, but.
Do you have any questions to Deborah related to any of the items?
Yeah, I do. So the judicial impact fee, like, I remember this being like $750,000, and now here it says 2.1. So what's the number there that we're actually working, that's at play?
So about 4 years ago, the state defunded that. And when they defunded it, I think it was 750,000, Robin, correct me if I'm wrong. That was what the number was just going forward year after year
Per
after
year.
year.
Per year.
Per year.
So this is a 2-year number.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
And it's, okay,
Okay,
that helps.
and then the county went through a laborious process to
Document,
do a conservative estimate and track what their true costs were to state-related cases and compared that to other counties of similar size, with similar amounts of court staff. And the difference of that was the $2.2 million per biennium that this county pays more than the other counties did. Recognizing that probably all counties have some impact on state-related cases, but Thurston County by far and large has a tremendous impact on their court cases. And so we did a very long process with the legislature, and we had a very difficult time getting that through the budget chairs in both the House and the Senate. And so we've had some really good champions in our delegation in the past, and we will, even though we're losing Lori, we'll continue to have good champions on this, but we need to remind the budget chairs, remind our delegation why we need this money, why it's important. And Romero, you mentioned something about maybe updating those numbers. If we have good documentation to show why this 2.2 is conservative and it really should be higher, we need to talk about whether or not we want to raise that flag. I'm still waiting to see the governor's proposed budget and see if the court system put that number into their budget, which would automatically be introduced into the governor's proposed budget. We'll see that probably around the first week of December.
I think there was an indication that perhaps it's gonna be part of the administrative court's budget to include this, but.
It's in their base, and Chris Stanley has assured us that it would remain in there. So I don't think that it's been removed, but
It has not.
we get assurance from the governor's budget.
And we got that assurance a couple of years ago, before Chris was on board.
Yes.
They didn't put the proviso in there, they just said, oh, it's part of our base. And then there was this flurry of excitement saying, oh gosh, it's not there, we need the proviso, so.
It was backed out and cared for though. And for some reason, the agency didn't recognize that.
At the Inter-Branch Advisory Committee, I asked specifically the court administrator for AOC and the Chief Justice Gonzalez about that base and whether we would, if we were on there, and just making sure that Thurston County would be on there, and they both assured me they would, and that they wouldn't be removed from it. So it is on there from their last assurances, and if we're not, then I will be going back to those minutes and.
Well, but there's, as Deborah said, they told us that a couple years ago, and then when we saw the governor's budget came out, there's a report you can run, and we clearly saw that there was a change at carry forward level that's done at an analyst level that backed our money out. And when we asked the department about that, they said, oh no, it's in there. Well, no, it wasn't. So it was a technical thing that came later that we'll just double check. I'm sure it's in, but we're gonna trust but verify.
And even if it is in, that doesn't mean that the House or the Senate will put it in their
That's right.
budgets. And so I think we have a lot of work to do at the legislative level to make sure that that stays in.
So they don't
I
forget.
agree. So I would say that we have no current information beyond what we prepared at the time they asked for a report.
I mean, I think it's convenient for them, and right now I guess civil cases are not our priority, and if we don't get this funding, theirs are just gonna get bumped down the line, and because criminal cases are our COVID priority, those are the ones that we should be addressing, and we save money for the Attorney General's office, so their attorneys are not traveling all over the state where these cases take. And if we have to do the breakdown of cost again, where we're tracking that, I will request, and I know I can request it won't be reimbursed necessarily, but I would like to request that time that's spent on tracking is added on, because the amount of workload that's added on to judicial staff as well as judicial officers is tenfold. Because you have to be, not only for Superior Court, it's also for the clerk's office as well, because they have to be flagging it case by case every time something is filed. And then after that, Superior Court staff is also tracking it. So the amount of work that's added on just to track these cases we should be reimbursed for that amount of work.
And I think that we need an updated one-pager on this so that we can start talking with our delegation about it so that they understand that, first of all, the 2.18 million is a very conservative number. There were things that were not included in that probably should have been. And then talk about the work that's involved of doing what we had to do before and getting their support for just having that put in the budget.
Is there a, Ramiro, I'm gonna look at you and Deborah too, but we've got our Thurston County agenda, and then we usually have like a regional one that includes like cities and stuff, and I'm just wondering like the interplay there, like is the Nisqually River and I-5 stuff, is that a better item for the regional priorities versus the county?
I just had a follow-up meeting yesterday, and this was part of the conversation, as well as to include as a continued conversation with the legislatures to not forget this. It also included is in the distillery at Tumwater continued to be part of the proposal. The other item they would discuss is a new proposal by the Port of Olympia to support a little bit of improvements on their properties. And also we had a discussion on the regional airport as well. And also they'd like to add more related to continue to support to homeless strategies in the county. But as soon as that list is narrowed down, I will share that with you. But we had a follow-up conversation yesterday.
Yeah, I agree with.
We included the I-5 was there. Yeah, it was there.
I agree with Commissioner Menser, and that seems more of a regional thing to have on a legislative agenda. It would be more proactive than having it just on ours again, and it takes away one of our slots.
Right, it's like, we know there's broad support across the region for that one, where they don't care about.
Any other questions to Deborah related to any of the items presented? And I can propose a way to move forward.
I have a question about the revenue and spending flexibility. And that is, what change would you request to the REIT 1 and REIT 2 laws? Because they already allow for M&O under certain conditions, and Thurston County just doesn't meet the condition. So what would you look to amend?
It would be to allow up to 20%.
It allows up to 35% now.
Without no restrictions.
You're asking to remove the restrictions. Right. That's going to be a huge stretch.
Oh, everything here is a huge stretch.
What is the restriction that's holding us back?
The restriction says that we have to be able to show that we can fully fund all projects on our CIP, and we can't show that.
Because that's a huge high bar that they impose.
It is a high bar, but what it's basically saying is that you need to be able to fund your capital programs to build the stuff before they allow the money for M&O. And I don't think that we've got a logical rebuttal to that that'll fly.
Our capital programs, I mean, that's a list of projects into the sky. And we have a whole binder, and some of them are like for 10 years down the road.
I agree.
So and you're supposed to put everything on there just in case a grant might come in that you can think. So who would ever have a fully funded capital project list?
There are counties that satisfy this.
And I think the proposal is to allow up to 20% of M&O for those projects that have been built using this funding source.
That's right.
So,
that's how it is
that includes
in conservation futures.
in the purchase.
Right. So but again.
No, but that's my question, is how would you suggest that we change that? And what's the possibility of something like that passing, which I'm suggesting is nil.
Well, that's the thing, and if we go down each one of them, the possibility of us passing, you know.
I think we've got a pretty good shot at some of these things. I just don't think that there's any possibility of getting a change like this to REIT.
Has anybody ever talked about a REIT 3?
There is a REIT 3.
With no restrictions. Okay, well then REIT 4.
There are 4 types of REITs currently available, so a REIT 5.
And I agree with Robin on that, and I think that we need to be thinking about, what are requests that the legislature is going to take seriously, and how much political capital do we want to spend on which items? We have to remember that they're going to be dealing, so Commissioner Mincer, to your point, I agree with you. I think that we should have Thurston County specific items up front, and that we should state the regional items that we support, and then we know there are going to be statewide initiatives that the county supports as well. And I think those two could probably be summarized in a paragraph, the regional and the statewide, and then we could go into more detail and spend more white space on the Thurston County specific items. And in terms of, so we've already talked about the first one, the judicial impact fee. In terms of the veterans levy, that is on WASAC's list. They would support it, but that's not something that they're going to pursue themselves. And so Thurston County took the lead on that last time. We did get a sponsor for that. As Romero said, we got it out of the House Finance Committee, which was a big deal, but then it died in rules. And the economy has changed since then. The last time this ran, we were in a really good economy. Now the state revenue forecasts are going down. We have inflation, we have a recession looming. We're going to be getting more federal money in, but it's for certain things like prescription drug costs and for climate and things like that. And so the Republican caucuses are still pushing for tax relief to citizens. So I am more uncomfortable proposing something like this, and Thurston County being out in front on this, especially since we know that the ranking member of the Finance Committee was vehemently opposed to this. And he made that case in the Finance Committee, and it passed out on committee lines. So and this particular one, leaves it a little bit more open, saying we need additional resources. Maybe there could be a discussion within the budget on something like that, rather than changing the statute at this point in time. But I would put a question mark on that one. The next one, mental health and substance use, there is a statewide committee that's looking at that. There's legislators on there, there's people representing Thurston region on there, and they have a whole list of recommendations, some for the upcoming legislative session, some for the 2024 legislative session. And there's going to be a very strong legislative focus on not only getting the 988 system hubs out there, but then also making sure that there's funding for the mobile teams and that there's funding for the crisis receiving centers. So there's going to be a big push at the state level in terms of operating and capital dollars for that particular topic. On the I-5 Mounts Road, I believe that the way that discussion ended was we're not ready to make an ask in the upcoming session for dollars because of the NEPA review process and how long that's going to take. And so this is really something to keep in mind for 25-27. And so I think that, again, we could fold that into the regional thing, saying, this is something that's going to be of continued importance to the county, but we're not asking for money on that particular topic in the next session, if that remains to be the case. Revenue and spending flexibility for counties, that's an ongoing issue, not just for these projects, but if the county has, if we could delve into, what are the circumstances that we don't need and why don't we need them, we may not be alone, and maybe we could get that adjusted, but we need to get some more information on that, on why that is the case. And then on the left plan one, I have seen some pretty brutal fights in legislative committees where they tried to merge left one and left two. And it was, they were willing to follow their swords for that one. So to try and tap into the left one surplus, I think is DOA. And so, maybe there's another way we could get the legislature to help the counties.
Let me just say something on that. consolidating, you're right, left one, left two. But the only thing the counties are asking for on that surplus, if you will, because there is a surplus, is to cover the medical costs for the senior members that are out on retirement. It's strictly to benefit them. It's so that they can get adequate medical care. So it isn't like we're asking for something other than benefiting those
Existing.
the system membership right there. I mean, it's all, it's not asking to stretch out any farther. Just we would benefit them with that fund, which is there to benefit them.
So the legislature did do something for Left One last session but it didn't dip into the surplus, but it did create more benefits for the Left One members. And aren't all of the Left One members seniors? Yeah.
Well, I guess most of them are.
And they had, and I remember I sent this information, but I don't have it off the top of my head, how many members at that point in time were still in the Left One system. And so I guess what I would need to know, and maybe we could work with the Department of Revenue to figure this out, is if we were to ask for something like that, would it indeed come out of their benefits, or would it just be additional state funding that would go in to help counties?
Oh, no, wouldn't, no state funding would go into that. It would strictly be out of their surplus on their fund.
So what are they talking about doing with that surplus? Are they talking about?
They've tried to steal it several times.
Well, the last I heard, they may have been talking about using it to shore up the other pension programs, but there were barriers to that. So do you have any ideas?
Big barrier to
Yeah,
that.
there's a court
Yeah.
case.
So what are they talking about doing with the money? I mean, short of refunding it to the entities that paid into it, which in part would be us.
I'm not aware of any
They're
discussions.
doing individual allocations. That's coming up, individual allocations.
They increase their benefits like one time or.
Yeah.
It was $100 per 1 month of service.
Or
I think that's
the one time they
lump
did.
sum, yeah. So that's part of what they're gonna do with it, yeah.
Chunk of it that way.
Yeah.
I wanna go back to the financial flexibility. Didn't we, a couple of years ago, we were only talking about park impact fees? We weren't trying to do REIT 1 and REIT 2.
Yeah.
And what's wrong with that?
No, we can, and I think the traffic impact, the impact fees also found a challenge as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, it didn't make it. and
Yeah,
I'm
we
just-
can.
I don't know, I mean,
We can pare it down.
if that's more likely to advance, then
They're gonna tell us they've already allowed this in REIT, and it's up to us to meet the criteria.
I wanna hear more about 3 and 4, 5, or whatever.
You'd like to hear more about
Not
those
right
other
now, but
criteria?
I wasn't
Okay.
even aware of that.
I will make sure that I get you that information.
So maybe I can propose the next steps, commissioners. The items that I have, in addition to the listing here, is the joint service liability, the agricultural supply issues, the Tenino Ag Park, the animal service system tax for pet toys, I believe.
Luxury pet items.
The Deschutes Watershed Council seed money, ITA core costs, maybe using the HCA priority listed language, trust land transfer program, bring it back, and in revisions within the items they have presented to you. My suggestion that I will be sending through your assistants just the title of those items. And I may suggest that probably you have 5 points for each item, because a single vote may not give me the ranking that I need. So you have 5 points for each of the items, and then you have the latitude. Please provide that to your assistants. I will compile those, and I will bring back to you the result of that ranking. Does that work? So 5 points for each of the items that are going to be sent to your assistants, outlining the items I just stated.
I just want to mention one thing to this. Just kind of planting the seed, if you will, because the Nisqually River issue is our issue, basically. The Pierce County side's high, so they don't have to worry too much about it. But on the whole I-5 washout, we're talking about billions of dollars by the time they get done with that whole program. And it's been alleged at the Nisqually River Council meeting that by putting some flood control requirements on the Alder Lake Dam or Tacoma Power, it alleviates the need to even replace the I-5 bridge system due to the threat of washout. And all they're saying is that if the level of the dam was lowered prior to an incoming, what we used to call the Pineapple Express, it will not have a threat of flooding like we've had recently or in '96 or in other years past. But there's never been a requirement on the licensing issue of Tacoma Power that they have anything to do with flood control. I don't know, the board has signed off. Did we send a letter one time with all three of us? But I've been communicating with our legislative folks, Marilyn, Strickland.
Yeah, the board did send the
Others,
letter.
but I
Tacoma
think you
Power,
guys participated
2020.
as well in that. But it's really worth looking into. If they would, it wouldn't cost any money to do this. I'm not saying they couldn't have a little less power production for a few days out of a storm event. It'd be just a little less though. Anyway, so there's a different way to skin the cat that's a problem. And it's not about a lot of money, it's about common sense. We need to control that flooding anyway.
Did you get a response from Tacoma Power?
Oh,
They
they're
just-
not in love with
They
me.
just acknowledged receiving the letter.
But anyway, to me, it's a no-brainer. The threat is the washout of a catastrophic flood and knocking out I-5 because of that loop that's cutting back in below that footing.
Even as a near-term measure until the bridge
Oh,
gets
yeah.
replaced for salmon
And I think I referred to that in my latest letter, that in the near term, I think it might have been, that's the way I put it. I don't know, maybe you saw my letter somewhere. Anyway, that issue is, I just want you to be aware of it, that it is an issue more for us than anybody else. And I'm just curious, what are they talking about, a percentage of inflation up there at the Capitol? Where are we at? What's the kind of the number they're talking about? 6%, 8%, 10%?
I will go back and look at the latest report and send the information on what they're talking about right now. But what I have heard on the news, I'm sure everybody else has heard too, is there's a 100% chance we're gonna be in a recession. The question is how deep and how long.
Well, right, but the inflation is a big piece of what we're dealing with.
I wanna say 10%, but I'm not, don't quote me on that.
And I'm gonna come back to you, Robin, at a later date. We're gonna discuss that a little more. Okay, thank you, that's it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Deborah, for coming.
Deborah, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Walking us through the different items, and we will be adjusting our list.
For your insights, thank you.
But we appreciated your.
Just a few things to fix.
And just a reminder, we have a meeting on the 3rd too with BoCC to talk with them. So appreciate that. Oh, and happy birthday.
There you go.
Thank you.
I want you to know I represent that demographic of old guys and that.
I wasn't gonna say anything.
And I catch the dickens every time I bring up the possibility of taking
That's
some
why
of
you're
this
part
out.
of Planet One.
Anyway, so just so you know that.
Okay, trail connectivity program, Public Works. Guys run deep, there's always.
It takes a village.
So, Commissioners, we're not gonna go through this very comprehensive presentation that you all received. And this, I just gonna take where we left off on that presentation. And, there was
90 slides, you know?
a couple of proposals, it was presented to you, and one of which was a staff's recommendation based on the $2 million the board set aside to what we call a signature trail project. There was a couple of options the connection to Dakota became a little more challenging. The what do you call it, the extension of the Gate Belmore Trail, mainly related to the central. And the result of that conversation was the Commissioner Mejia was going to bring this and have a conversation with the mayors of South County, and staff was there, and Shannon went with Shannon Shulat. I've heard that it was a good conversation, and at this point, that's what we're going to pick up this conversation. Good conversation, and Commissioner Mejia can probably elaborate on that is, and that I believe through that conversation, moving forward with a couple good proposals that I believe the board should consider. Commissioner?
Yeah, so thank you, Shannon, again for joining me at that meeting. And so we talked about the trail, and Shannon did a great job in explaining kind of what the proposals were. As expected, the first round was pretty strong on the Dakota connectivity, extending that. And then Shannon walked them through the funds, through what we had, through the different things that we had to do. And from there, I think the mayors understood kind of what we're trying to do. However, there was, the mayor of Tenino did bring up a part of the Yelm Rainier Tenino Trail where he wanted it paved. So me and Shannon did a little field trip down to the trail, and basically, gosh, just went all over the page. Basically, the mayor supported the Gate Belmore Trail, and with the ability that there's this part of the Yelm Rainier Tenino Trail where there isn't a need to purchase any land. It's already county owned, and it's already kind of ready for paving. So basically, if that can get paved, they said they would be in support of the Gate Belmore Trail. They say this has been a long-standing area that they've been advocating to get paved. So they're hoping that if we can get this paved, they would be fully in support of the Gate Belmore Trail, with the possibility to, in the future, expand the Yelm Rainier Tenino Trail once more funding becomes available. Did that clarify it, Shannon? Did I?
Yes, that was great.
Shannon, do you want to kind of go through it a little bit,
Yeah, so, as Commissioner Mejia stated, we met with the mayor of Tenino. We walked that section. Basically, what happens is that at the train depot, the asphalt ends. And so there's about a 0.24 mile extension that goes to Crowder Road. That was the request of can the county help us to extend that trail? People walk on that trail, not really bike because of the condition of the road. So what we did was we looked again at that proposal for the Yelm Rainier Tenino Trail for the Dakota extension, and looked at the possibility of just taking that, extending that trail down, multi-use trail down to Crowder Road. So in your packet here, it shows what that proposal would do. The focus seems to be working on extending the trail west, and didn't really focus on going down to Dakota yet. Tenino has submitted a grant application for some design engineering for segments GR3 and 4, and those are also included in there. It's the pink is GR3B, and the blue is GR3C, and then the orange is GR4. So that
they're looking at funding for that. So the assistants would need to just complete the dotted yellow section to take it to Crowder Road. So if you have any questions. And then, there's packets, there's pictures in the back showing the current existing conditions of that trail, looking east and west.
I think we would say that additionally that it's not just ready to be paved. There's some prep work that needs to be done. So it's not like it's leveled off and compacted and paved for it. There's additional work that needs to be
And the pictures are telling.
Yeah.
So, it's a little bit more effort, but I think it's something the board should consider.
I'm ready to go.
And I'm sorry, go ahead.
Can we go through the money again? Because there was a lot of confusion about how much we allocated last year, this year, or back. How much are these gonna cost based on, how much did we actually allocate? And then how much is this gonna take up of that money?
So as part of the budget process on Wednesday morning, we'll look at the REAP 2 financial plan. The CIP is submitted and the REAP plan only included $1 million that had not been spent this year. But the proposed change to that plan includes $2 million, and then the board has the option, of course, to make that an ongoing earmark of the REAP 2 fund. So we'll look at that tomorrow morning.
Yeah, and the proposal you will see tomorrow on the trail connectivity program, our proposal is to have an ongoing investment in that. So, because I believe that was one of the questions the board had, is if it is a program, why do we have a single one time and not having a program itself? So the proposal that you will see tomorrow on the REAP 2 addresses some of the concerns the board had.
But if it was 1 million or 2 million, let's just say, this says 320 to do the extension, and how much was the Gate Belmore project?
The Gate Belmore, we need to look into that further. We
need to
have
update the cost estimate.
Yeah.
That's sense of money.
Well, you gave us one a couple weeks ago.
That was from 2020.
And what was that?
That estimate was a little over, 820,000.
So it's probably gonna be like 1.2.
We're thinking it'll be significantly more, yeah.
So we'll have to allocate more money.
There's a possibility,
To
but
do
we need
these
to
two.
flesh that out a little bit more.
And that, how many miles of pavement is that?
That's 3.6.
3 points. Is there any discussion about a couple of the shorter sections up near the Gate Schoolhouse? There were just a couple places there, I think, that had a potential, but there was a bridge issue, and that wasn't feasible. So instead of the longer section, what was that shorter? There was maybe 2 shorter sections right by the Gate Schoolhouse. Am I ringing a bell with anybody?
Well, if we're talking about, are we talking about the northern portion by
Eastern.
Kennedale Park?
No, the western section, towards the Gate Schoolhouse.
I think what we originally proposed, we had 4 different options. With respect to Gate Belmore, we were looking at the north section, Kennedale
Right, that was the,
Park, and then we looked at the central section.
right,
So
but we never did look at the, right next to the school, and that might be something we can do for that community. That's a very short section there.
we can look at that. I know we were looking at going in between the trestles, right? Because we know the trestles are what's gonna cost more money, so we're trying to do bite-sized pieces, but we can certainly look at that. The board would like
Yeah,
us
the
to do
longer
that.
section is in between a couple trestles, I believe, too.
Correct, that's why we did that, right?
Yeah.
And
then
also,
I think there's a couple short sections right down by the school.
if we can look, I do not know from memory. So we can certainly look at that.
We didn't look at that at that time. We were focusing on that central section because the county owns 84 acres of property
Right.
there.
Right.
And so the ability to put in a parking spot or, a parking lot with some picnic tables seemed more feasible. But we.
And also
I just,
positioned us
I mean,
for
if we're
grant,
trying
yeah.
to do something for everybody, that would be a little something that we could do for them at the same time while we're doing something for, tonight, that's all.
Yeah, we can absolutely look at that.
So do I hear concurrence on the, at least on the Gabe Belmore Central, this paving of 0.24 miles, stated by Commissioner Mejia, in exploring the option of the trail?
Well, that's what but I was wondering if we didn't have enough to do the longer section, or do half of the longer section.
We'll look at that.
And maybe one of the shorter sections. I still want to do a railroad car on the bridge. That buying these bridges you buy drives me nuts. Because we can buy a railroad car for $1,000 and put across there. And it'll be just fine.
Let's get the county engineer in here and.
Maybe that may be a conversation for a different day, but do I hear concurrence?
We
at
don't
least on
always
that-
have
on
to
that
waste the
strategy?
taxpayers' money. We're allowed to make exceptions and do common sense things once in a while. And buying $1 million bridges is not one.
That's a perspective.
Yeah, that's my perspective and all the taxpayers that I know.
Okay,
Everyone.
fair enough.
So for my issue is, we don't know how much money we have to spend. So until we have that conversation, because if I say yes to 320,000, but we decide tomorrow we're only gonna spend $1 million, that means we can't do the Gabe Belmore Trail. So we kind of have to know how much we're spending before I can say which projects I want to
What I
spend
was
money
hoping
on.
to concur with, narrowing down the three options that you just heard, as opposed to just continue to work on the many options that was presented to you.
That's fine, and narrow them down.
It's just
I'm
narrow it
good
down.
with what you guys came up with, as long as we can afford it.
Tomorrow you will see the.
So when you
read.
say narrow down to 3 options, I'm hearing the extension on the Tenino to Bakota for a quarter of a mile, the
Gabe Belmore Central.
Gabe Belmore Central, and then
Exploring
looking
that
at.
option.
But does it, and I'm throwing in there, does it need to be the total Gabe Belmore extension of 3 or 6 or whatever it was? We might be able, okay, so we're gonna take a little bit out from the Tenino program to fix that. Why do we have to do the whole section?
We don't.
We maybe just
So,
do a parking lot and a picnic table
So
setup.
if you see the Central doesn't do the whole Gabe Belmore. It's
No,
just-
no, I know it
We'd be
doesn't
talking
do-
about 5.
I'm just
Just
saying,
5
doing
to
a
6.
portion, reduce the size of that piece.
Basically let the dollar amount that the board allocates over the next, let's say, at least 2 years, be the constraint for what we do.
Yes,
Is that,
yeah, that's kind of what I'm looking for.
we can do that.
So that's really what I was hoping to narrow down those options. And more to come.
But for right now, go with Commissioner Mejia's deal tonight.
And then the mayor of Tenino said that he would also be maintaining. if
Oh, yes, we will
going-
be working on an interlocal agreement for the meetings.
Yeah, so he said that wouldn't be, I asked him specifically, would you maintain that additional 0.25 if we were to put asphalt on it, and he said yes. So he's fully aware of that, and it goes into our maintenance and operations.
Thumbs up.
So, do you have?
I think we got it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm still confused about the money and the projects. I mean, I'm not gonna wanna break up, I'm not gonna wanna do some small chunk of the 3.6 and then some other chunk, some other end of the trail. I think the longer pieces you can have so that it's worth people's time to use it, is better. It's all about connectivity. I don't want like little pieces here, little pieces there. I want the longest, best connected pieces possible. So I'm not sure I'll be supportive of Commissioner Edwards' idea it depends on the money. I mean, if the money's there, then yeah, like if we can do the 3.6 and then there's a little extra money and then we can start at the other end by Gates School, that makes perfect sense. But if we're short of money for the 3.6, I don't know that I wanna like do 1.6 now and then start somewhere else and we have two disconnected pieces just because the money, you know what I'm saying? That's why this whole discussion is hard for me to have without knowing what the budget is.
Well, I think it's a
I'd rather stretch the budget and get a full chunk done. Not to be limited to one, you know, it's 2 million, I'd rather stretch it to 2.2 and get the chunk done, not do chunks because we set an arbitrary limit of 2 million.
And the conversation with the
Or
REIT
1 million.
tomorrow will give you that window.
Exactly, so
That
I'd like to
window.
be able to revisit this
So
tomorrow.
you will see the proposal on the REIT 2 allocations tomorrow. And the next step in the process to Public Works to bring those 3 elements that you just discussed today a little more closer to an estimate. And there will be another decision point by the board at that time.
Yeah.
So
And-
that is the next steps.
And I would say that we're talking about what we can construct within the next year or two, and we're also talking about how does that position us for future grant opportunities? And so we've had the opportunity to submit some of these projects for grants. We've gotten really good feedback from those granting agencies about what would make us more attractive, our projects more attractive in the future. So we have that in mind as well. So even if we put a piece here and a piece here that are serving those communities, it's also that attractiveness for future grant money to connect them. That's really important too. So we can talk about that when we come back.
Okay, so we'll be discussing the budget aspect of this tomorrow. Okay, next is, thank you.
Thank you.
Boundary line adjustment. So it's 11:30, do we have time to cover both issues?
It should be.
Okay, so boundary line adjustment, A22, this is a follow-up to a briefing we had last week.
Yeah, and this really, when the staff presented this particular boundary line adjustment code amendment, the 2 commissioners present, didn't really have any significant issues, questions. So I think we delay this decision because the decision next steps are for the board to consider public hearing, setting a public hearing, and waiting for Commissioner Edwards to be part of that conversation. And I don't know if you have got the chance to look at the documentation. Maybe Andrew can walk us through briefly as to what this amendment do for Commissioner Edwards' benefit. And then I will ask the board comfortable to bring an item to set a public hearing.
And has this been through the planning commission?
Yes, sir.
And their recommendation?
Is to support it.
It was a split vote, but there wasn't any explanation as to what the minority, why the nay votes were nay, so that's kind of confusing there.
But the majority, what was the majority vote?
7-2.
7-2? And that's more than likely what I'm gonna be in favor. So you can make it pretty simple, because that's where I'm going.
So Andrew's here to answer the question.
Okay.
Questions, Commissioner Evans?
No, I'm not gonna have any questions. I wanna get on with Stephen's situation.
Commissioner Menzer?
No.
Okay, so then are you ready to move forward? And then the next step would be to set a public hearing, is that correct?
Yep.
Would this come as an AIS?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so commissioners, are we ready to move on a public hearing for this? Thumbs up?
Okay, so we'll bring an AIS to set a public hearing.
See, I told you that was gonna be.
Okay, next, Stephen, you'll join us. This is a commissioner item, it's ARPA funds, Agricultural Recovery Program proposal. This is a follow-up from a conversation we had in regards to ARPA funds. And Stephen has decided to join us to walk us through this proposal that they've put forward on the Agricultural Sector Recovery Program. So, Stephen?
Yeah, thanks for inviting me in. It's nice to be here. Nice to be here in person. I don't get here too often. I'll have something to hand around, but I'll just wait for the moment so that it's not distracting and I just wanted to give you something you could kind of take away. I think the best spot is just a couple moments on sort of history of where we have come with this project, because it's been since July of 2021 that we've really been deliberating on this. So if you recall, back in July of last summer, we were looking at COVID recovery measures for agriculture. At that time, a proposal was presented that included this ag labor proposal as a set aside. It included ag grants, and it included a market recovery component associated with cooperative marketing, and then also delivering food to food aid organizations as part of the package. So around that time, we started putting in place what I really want to emphasize is a bottom-up approach to this proposal that you're seeing today. Because I watched the recording from last week, and I wasn't quite confident that the nature of how much the farms have informed this proposal was really, I guess, I don't want to say, was understood. You know, it was like we did a lot of work with the ag committee during that time last summer, and we did a questionnaire out to farmers in the county, and we talked about if there's funding in the county to respond to your business issues associated with recovery from the pandemic, what are the most pressing issues? Number one was cost of production. You know, that continues today, and if anything, it's worse. But that is something that, you know, is very difficult. We do not have control over the larger economy to control cost of input. But number two was labor, and finding labor, retaining labor, recruiting labor. That's number two issue cited by farmers in the county associated with recovering from the pandemic. And keep in mind, you know, this proposal is focused specifically on ARPA funds. We were really interested at the outset that we could maybe direct some of those funds to infrastructure, because I believe, as much as all of you do, that we have major infrastructure issues. One of the key ones, of which I know we've gotten a lot of support from you on, and we're keenly interested in, which was the processing facility expansion. We were told, a year ago, that's not fundable. Don't pursue that avenue. You will not be able to use ARPA recovery funds for investing in a processing facility. Because in CARES funds, if you recall, 2 years ago, we came with an infrastructure funding proposal, and that was, received a thumbs down response as well. So that's been my understanding. And so, ever since those meetings in summer of last year through the fall, to up to this point, which you've received the proposals, we've been operating under the direction of the board that we should be considering, top priorities for farmers and the ones that are fundable, and that falls in the category of a labor recovery proposal. And that's, I think, I wanted to kind of clear the air, because there's a lot of discussion about investing in infrastructure, about all these ways we could spend this ARPA funding, but we've gotten that kind of direction that this is fundable and you should be funding high priority topics. So, and then, how this money would be spent, I think that's kind of the number two really important piece of this. This is not an education proposal. It's not to teach people necessarily, how to farm. It's a funding proposal which would link directly with the workforce development and put money to extend farms' labor budget. Because as we all know, money doesn't go as far now as it used to. These are a little bit like, I won't say grants because they're not grants, but they're direct funding opportunities for farmers. If you want to hire somebody, we're going to help you by working with workforce development, our regional entities, Pac Mountain Workforce Development, to recruit people onto your farm, and we'll give you funding to extend your labor budget. So it's really directly tackling that question of, do you have enough money to get crops to market?
Keep going, I'm listening.
Yeah, okay. So do you have funding to get the labor you need? Because we've had farmers plowing in crops. That's been very common. People who are putting things in the ground who can't get them all the way to market. So I just kind of wanted to give that kind of high level, like what is the funding? What's my understanding of the funding eligibility? What was the charge from the county and the board, and how we can put a proposal together? Clarify what the priority is among farmers, and then clarify how the money would really be spent. I guess the piece I want to share, which kind of anticipates a little bit potential critique of this, is a labor issue too big for this kind of funding? With $500,000 or $100,000, can the Board of County Commissioners actually make a dent on labor as an issue? My response to that is, that this is an opportunity to put together a framework for recruiting workforce development to work on this issue. We've never really had a fundamental relationship between Pac Mountain workforce development and the ag industry. So this is an opportunity that really enlists Pac Mountain workforce development, creates the sort of social capital or pipeline to recruit people, get them to work, and provides a degree of support in the way of training by linking them with educational resources that are already available. We're not, putting together new educational materials. We're not teaching a lot of programs. We're helping people come up with, hey, can I get a certificate that's going to make me more money and it's going to make me excited to stay in agriculture? Meat processing is a good example. People don't just walk into meat shops and start cutting up carcasses. They actually receive training, and there's apprenticeship programs through the Northwest Meat Processors Association, who we're working directly with, to say, hey, here's the funding to go work in the meat shop. Here's a program you can get. We're going to give you a small stipend. This is intended to help you stay in the industry and make more money in this industry. And that is kind of the philosophy of the proposal. A little incentive in the way of a training or certificate to make more, a little bit of ability to keep people excited about the jobs, but really directly supporting people to hire people to kind of respond to, this absence of labor that they've experienced. So I hope that's not too much, too kind of unbroken, but I wanted to kind of lay those things out.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We'll go ahead and start with questions. Commissioner Edwards, any questions, sir? Well, we're waiting for Commissioner Edwards. Commissioner Menzer, any questions, sir?
Well, I talked to Stephen offline and asked a lot of questions, I guess, so I'll defer to you, Madam Chair, if I have any follow-up.
So my question is, and I've been involved in some of the beginning conversations of this proposal, and again, I just want to thank you and the Conservation District and everyone who really participated in this, because I know a lot of work and thought went into this, and trying to make it fit into those ARPA guidelines, which I think it's the most difficult part, I think.
Always been a challenge.
But my question is, this seems like short term, it would answer, but what's the plan long term? How, especially as we're going into, how are we going to keep incentivizing? Because the funds are only going to be able to be used until a certain point, right? But what are farmers, who are, receiving this incentive for their workers, right? How are they going to be able to keep up with it once that funding is out?
Right. One way to think about that, and I've tried to come up with the right word for this. I don't know if it's social capital. I don't know if it's pipeline. I don't know if it's infrastructure, social infrastructure. When Pac Mountain and a group of partners puts together a labor proposal to help place people, there's a lot of materials that go into that. You could think of just something as simple as the flyers to do outreach. You could think of the avenues to advertise materials within the industry. What are the highest impact locations to place jobs? What is that list of training resources in terms of certificate programs people could go to in order to say, hey, if I get a little stipend, I want to go to the National Young Farmers Coalition, and I'm going to get my apprentice level overview farming 8-week online $300 course. I'm going to take that. So that list of resources, the outreach materials, the connections in the community, locally, statewide, even nationwide when it comes to training resources, that's a body of capacity that we don't have now to help recruit people to farming, resource them as they're coming into farming, and then be effective as workers on the farm through certificates and the relationships with the various training opportunities. So yes, the money runs out, but once you have that in place, you can say, hey, what's the next funding source now that we have this game plan? And we're gonna go out and get $1 million or $500,000 or another chunk of money. And Pac Mountain gets funding like that for specific impacted industries on a not irregular basis. So we can use that infrastructure to then get additional funding and keep using it and keep bringing people in. So it doesn't last forever, but we've never had the opportunity to sort of build that pipeline or infrastructure to recruit, retain, and train.
Questions, Commissioner Edwards?
I too have had an opportunity to talk with Stephen about this, so I really don't have any questions. I think he's made a good explanation. I guess my concern is I think I saw something here,
35 folks or something.
Yeah.
Is what you have it broke down. Is there a compromise there that we could do something? I don't know. It's,
County manager had proposed a compromise.
Right, and.
oh,
and-
you already, did I miss that?
Last meeting.
Yeah, last.
Oh, okay.
Or the meeting where we discussed.
Yeah.
Well, maybe the one I wasn't there.
Is,
No, you,
I think
was I there? Okay.
Yeah, maybe a two-step process. This is a question more for you, Stephen. I know the proposal is $1 million and 35. If the board was to consider supporting this proposal at a half of you requesting, and then with the understanding, see how the program works.
Yeah.
And without having to commit the whole $1 million request.
Right.
Will that be something you can work with in those content?
Well, I think it's a smart approach. You've got multiple competing demands as the ARPA funding proceeds, and you want to see programs that have legs, that have impact, and that are effective. So, I mean, partially resourcing it and seeing how it goes and letting folks work in the program report back seems very reasonable to me.
That doesn't just, I don't expect you to make the decision
No,
today.
I think it makes sense.
Working through that process, and that will be coming out of the $1 million set aside of the agricultural line item on your ARPA plan.
Yeah, I'm good with the $500,000 investment.
I believe I am too. What do you think?
Yeah, well, for me, if the money's already there, like I would just, if it's already set aside, I mean, if it's not used, it's gonna come back anyways.
So you will see in the next report of the ARPA funds, then 500,000 will move into the obligated amount, and it will still remain at 500,000 for other agricultural needs.
Yeah, and what you're likely to see soon as well is a report back on some of the grants recipients and how people have utilized grant funding. These type of direct aid programs, they make a big impact because it's money that people can immediately put into the recovery of their business. So we're just about to hit send on a survey that we'll find out what did people use the funding on, how helpful was it?
The first round we did.
The first round, yeah, and so like literally that's teed up. I think it'll be exciting to bring that back, even if I just email all of you, an impact report of that funding.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome, yeah.
Great.
Okay.
Probably, Stephen.
Thank you for your
Thank you so
time.
much,
Good to see you.
Stephen.
Yeah, the opportunity.
Okay, it is 11:45.
I
And,
have a couple items, you can give me the program.
okay, go ahead.
No, just as an update.
As an update for,
We follow up on I know the commissioner was wanting to see where the childcare, particular facility in Rochester. As of last week, they received all the permits.
Yeah, but that's what, 8 months later? You're driving me nuts, and I appreciate that, okay? But
Keep in mind that some of the permits, they were waiting for from the state. So it's all that balance. So happy to report. They have to receive all the permits. And the second item as a follow-up the Hopkins District Commission chairs here is having a schedule an executive session for next week, November 3rd, 1 in the afternoon, where your attorneys will provide a perspective of the next steps and the options that you have related to the public hearing you held last week. And that's what I have.
November 3rd?
November 3rd at 1 in the afternoon is an executive session.
Okay. So 11:47. Commissioner items, Commissioner Edwards?
okay, the county news thing was the one about ranked choice voting. And you heard this morning already with the Nisqually River Dam proposal that if that was a flood control mechanism in place there, that it's and maybe it would be temporary, I don't know. It would prevent that from happening until something happens, and I just think that makes perfect sense. It's not asking much, it doesn't cost anything. Most dams already have that in there, in place. This one just doesn't.
The contention is that the river is only moving because of how they're operating the dam?
No, the flooding is because of excessive drainage out of the dam. And each time we've had a flood event, it's been a serious flood event, it's because they didn't release
water early
But you
enough.
were talking about taking out the I-5, which is the rivers.
Oh, well, that's
moving
the,
to the
that's the
ocean.
threat of taking out I-5 with a flood. You know that oxbow thing that's
Yeah.
underneath there?
That's
If that
pushing up
washes
and-
out under that footing, then that's gonna be the early demise of that bridge. And I'm saying that a solution, and maybe a temporary, maybe a permanent solution, I don't know. I'm not sure that's gonna be right, because I don't know how many lanes you go across there, is it 6 or 4? You know?
And right now is 3 on each
3
direction.
on each side, okay. So I don't know on capacity if that's something they need to worry about or not, but.
Yeah, it's twofold on that one. One is the flood is, well, actually threefold. Is the flooding is an issue, as you stated. The other is the environmental elements related to the pinch point of that goes under I-5. It doesn't give enough open the habitat for salmon migration.
Yeah.
The second, and the third is capacity. And capacity of the I-5 corridor. As you know, the DOT already built, additional capacity lanes north of the Nisqually River, and is the pinch point of the pressure is coming south. So those are the three elements on that particular project. Yeah.
The dam issue doesn't solve everything, but it's worth exploring. And why not have some flood control requirement in there? And what that requirement does is, okay, you have to release some water. You can't just-
Isn't that like FERC or whatever? Isn't this a federal
Yeah, it is. It's
agency
a
that has
federal,
to make
yeah.
a?
But we have input into that licensing issue, that's all. Kind of the same way we might have input into creating a park or something because they're doing something. So, that's all. So I mean, more to come on that, but I just wanted to bring that up. That cost of insurance is, I don't understand how come the counties weren't more interested in that. I see there was one thing here that got zero input, and that was taking a look at our energy grid.
Yeah.
And I don't understand why nobody wants to know that. That's worth knowing, I think, before you buy an electric fleet, you gotta know if you can plug it in or not.
This was like, I think this was 35 items had gotten down to 10, and then everybody voted as to what they wanted to prioritize for the top 4. So that one got no votes, just to advance to the final 4.
Sure.
It wasn't that
Not high
nobody
enough
was
priority.
interested in it, but nobody was interested in putting that as one of the top 4 WASAC items, in that last vote.
And at the first meeting of LSC, it did get discussed, but once it moved to a subcommittee, I don't know which subcommittee it was on. Like that's, a lot of things kind of went to die there in the different subcommittees. And I was in the jail one, and I was advocating for, the 50 million for Thurston County. So I wasn't keeping track of the other subcommittees and kind of what was happening there. So, but I was, just a little
I mean, this whole
surprised.
thing is like, that's why I'm appreciative to hear Deborah's expertise, because it's a chess game, right? It's like how much do we benefit from this versus what are its chances of actually getting through versus something the legislature might do anyway. You're like, so let's not put any capital into that one, because I think that's kind of what she was hinting about the mental health stuff. Like, they're already got 5 work groups, and a bunch of stuff's coming. So trying to overlay some conflicting requests there is not a smart thing to do. So there's all these tactical considerations in developing the right 3 or 4 things to emphasize, and unless you're knee deep in it. I mean, I'll tell you, I didn't want to be, my first year in LSC was 2020. I'd been on the board 1 year. I'd seen 1 legislative session. I'd seen 1, year's worth of county items. I felt really uncomfortable trying to weigh in on I'm getting a better sense of it now, just because time's passed and, you see what passes, what doesn't, who's in the legislature, you build relationships, all that. But it's quite a daunting task to put a bunch of county commissioners who may have been in office 5 minutes into a room and try to strategize these legislative priorities, because you may just be focused on the wrong things. Like, what does it matter to me? Well, okay, that's one factor. If it matters to me, of course, I'm gonna advocate for it, but if it's not the right tactical item to try to advance, you need expertise like from your lobbyists, and WASAC folks are good, like the policy folks are really good at telling us, hey, that's not gonna work, this so-and-so is on such and such committee, I ain't going anywhere. Good to know,
Okay, I don't wanna hog the show.
This is a kind of a Thursday thing, but since we're not doing Thursday, I had a meeting with the president and executive director of Evergreen State College. And the first thing that they wanted to talk to me about was challenges that they have with housing, because of, housing is not available and it's not affordable and students need housing, et cetera, West Olympia. Then they start talking about 4 buildings that they have that are empty. And I was like, well, wait a minute, why are you complaining to me about housing and you're sitting on 4 buildings? Well, it was a little unclear to me exactly the issue, but it sounded like those buildings, they were apartments, they turned them into dorms, like took the kitchens out and made more units. They need a lot, they've been mothballed for a while, so they would need a lot of, they want to turn them back into apartments. They want to go back, basically undo what they did. They want to put the kitchens back in, create less units, partner with an outside entity. Like, they don't want to run them as dorms because apparently it's overkill. They need a huge upfront investment. It's more housing than they actually need. And they'd like to just partner with somebody else to turn them into private housing that then students could use if they needed them. So I didn't know what to make out of all that, but it seemed crazy to have these 4 big, nice buildings like there. So I kind of pointed them toward Regional Housing Council. I said, there's funding streams, there's partnerships. I don't know what you qualify for. I don't know, making a chunk of them low income or affordable. Like, I didn't know what options, but you may get an inquiry from Evergreen leadership. He did, okay,
Yeah.
because I was like, that's who you need to talk to. I can't tell you what options you have for what you're trying to do, but it's, there's funding streams that all have strings and parameters and requirements for affordability and stuff, and maybe you should have a conversation with the Housing Council.
So they still need capacity for Evergreen students?
They do, yeah, and, when.
But not 4 huge dorms worth.
Yeah, so he talked to me at the Thinking Evergreen, Partners
Yep.
meeting, and so he approached me at that time, and he told me, we have these 4 buildings, but I was also confused because then he was also like, students are having a hard time affording rent, and we're really having an affordable housing crisis. I was just like,
Right, so
okay.
there's some kind of disconnect here, like, we gotta connect the dots somehow.
But then I was thinking, okay, you have big 4 dorms, and then we've seen issues with senior housing, and I was like, well, maybe senior housing, because that was, I think, one of the projects that we had at, the Oya Hotel, and I was like, well, is this a possibility that HUD can do, because they were looking for something to invest in to make into senior housing. And the Oya Hotel didn't work out, so, they still had that option available, so I was thinking, well, maybe HUD will be willing to partner with them, and we could do something like that, and those, if they were turned into apartments, but I asked him to follow up after that. I haven't heard back from him, so once he does, I want to keep the conversation going, for sure.
Isn't the enrollment way down?
Is that,
Starting to finally pick up, but it has been way down.
Yeah, it has been way down.
And,
right now, they've reached.
It went up.
It was just in the
They went up,
newspaper
yeah.
that they
It just
finally
went
had
up
an
this
uptick
year.
in enrollment.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, if, based on what I'm hearing, it's a little bit of a confusing conversation. Because there is a need for student housing, and they just need a third party to invest, and we just rent it. An interesting approach, Or
What
they
about
just,
homeless?
or just need to unload those buildings for anybody to use for other purposes and other activities. That will be an interesting proposal because the land use and the permitting associated with the university need to be addressed. Because that land use at the college, that's an, I don't believe allows for just any general housing other than student housing. So that will be an interesting process that we go through. This again, just my first reaction to this proposal, but it seems, as you said, it seems to be a little bit of
There's
disconnect.
apartments all in and around the backside of the, these are on the backside of the.
So outside of the campus?
They're on the so it's what I call the backside, you know, like away from the parkway. And Driftwood goes around or whatever, and there's parking lots back there. They're technically on the campus, but they're on the road. That's kind of the back edge.
So maybe outside of the actually boundaries of the college.
I don't know about that.
But anyway, so first reaction.
I think they're on campus.
Okay.
Which is, but here they are, here's the president telling me they basically want people, you know, in their mind, from the community living there. So there has to be some, you know, I thought maybe he should talk to Tom, you know, have a conversation with Tom about.
Yeah, I'll.
Or something.
So I'll bring, once he reaches out, and he said he was.
Maybe
that
that would be a good
conversation.
topic for you to bring tomorrow at the Regional Housing Council.
Yeah, I'm happy to bring Tom in, and I'll bring that on as an.
And you know, you heard
Okay.
that, yeah, okay.
And, yeah, my first gut reaction was honestly like HUD, because they would be able to navigate through the intricacies much more quickly than what we could, I mean, you know,
The
it's,
Housing Authority?
yeah.
I don't know if they'd be able to go any faster.
Well, no, not fast, but they would be able to, they have the experience with navigating with kind of these complex issues and,
Thurston County Housing Authority?
yeah.
Yeah, because they are looking for,
Yeah,
you know, they're still looking for the
for
Oyo Hotel to be as an opportunity to purchase, but you know the difficulties with that
With
property.
that, so,
And the
You
FAA's.
got a HUD meeting tomorrow?
no, regional housing.
Regional Housing
Yeah,
Council.
or tomorrow.
Yeah.
I've got budget all day from 9 to 4, what's that?
It's
so
late
much
in the
is-
afternoon.
It's not in the afternoon,
We're done at noon?
at 4.
No,
We're
done.
Oh, yours is at 4?
Yeah, so.
Oh, okay, good.
we're done when you've made the final
Yeah.
decision.
Done when we're done, or at 4.
Okay.
If we're not.
10 in the morning, done.
Anything else, Commissioner Minster?
Oh, we're out of time, so I'll just stop right there.
Okay, it is 12:01 PM. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.